A boot slammed against the boarded-up door and the wood cracked down the middle. A man in a gray suit stepped through the gap. He grabbed the paper off the counter and tore it clean in half. Then he threw the two pieces down at a woman's feet. She dropped to her knees and started gathering the scraps. Her hands were shaking hard. A dog growled low somewhere behind her in the dark. The man laughed and told her to get out. He said the deed meant nothing at all. He said her husband died with nothing and she would die with nothing too. Her name was Delia Marsh, and she had $90 left in the whole world. She looked up at him, and she did not cry. What she found behind that projection booth wall would flip this entire town upside down. Stay with me on this one. Now let me take you back a few weeks to the morning that started all of it. The county auction was held in a gravel lot off the old highway, the kind of road nobody drives on purpose anymore. Trucks parked crooked in the dust. Men in work boots stood around drinking coffee. And in the middle of them stood Delia Marsh holding her son's hand, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big because it used to belong to her husband. She was 34 years old, 6 months a widow. And she had exactly $91 folded in her pocket, most of it in singles. The auctioneer moved fast. A tractor with a bad engine, fence posts, a trailer nobody wanted. People bid, people won, people drove off. Delia just waited for the one thing she'd circled in the newspaper. Lot 41, the old drive-in. When it came up, a couple of men laughed out loud. A boarded-up drive-in cinema, rusted marquee, 12 acres off Route 66, closed for years, back taxes owed, sold as is. "Who'll start me at 100, the auctioneer said. Nobody moved. 90, somebody give me 90. Delia raised her hand. A few heads turned. One man grinned and shook his head like he'd seen something sad. And here's the thing you have to understand. To those men, that lot was junk. A money pit. A place where a person went to lose whatever they had left. But Delia had already lost everything else. So what was one more gamble? 90 going once, the auctioneer said, going twice. He looked around, giving anyone a chance to save her from herself. Nobody did. Sold to the lady in the big coat. Her boy looked up at her. His name was Tommy, 9 years old with his father's stubborn chin. "Mom," he whispered, "did we just buy a movie theater?" "We bought something," she said. "We'll figure out what." She counted out $90 into the clerk's hand, one wrinkled bill at a time. When she was done, she had a single dollar left. The clerk gave her a rusted key and a folded deed and looked at her like he wanted to say sorry. Now Delia hadn't come there on a whim. 2 weeks before her husband Sam died, he'd said something strange from his hospital bed. He'd grabbed her wrist, half out of his mind on the medicine, and said, "The drive-in, Delia. It was always supposed to be ours. Go see the drive-in." She thought it was the fever talking, but she never forgot it. And when she saw that lot in the paper, something in her chest wouldn't let it go. They drove out to see it that same afternoon. The place was worse than the photo. The great white screen stood at the far end, gray now, streaked with rust. The speaker poles leaned in crooked rows. Weeds grew waist-high. And the marquee out front hung dark, half its letters gone. Tommy ran ahead through the weeds, thrilled the way only a 9-year-old can be about a place that should scare him. And that's when they heard the whimper. Under the concession stand, tucked in the shadow, was a dog. A German shepherd, thin as a fence rail with a bad back leg he held up off the ground. He was filthy. He was starving. And when Delia knelt and held out her last dollar's worth of crackers, he crawled to her on his belly and ate them right out of her hand. "Can we keep him?" Tommy said. It wasn't really a question. Delia looked at the broken screen, the broken sign, and the broken dog. 3 broken things and a broken woman, all in one dusty lot. "Yeah," she said, "I think he came with the place." The dog limped a slow circle around them. then hobbled straight toward a squat concrete box near the back with a slot window facing the screen. The projection booth. He stopped at the door, looked back, and gave one short bark. "He wants us to follow," Tommy said. "He wants dinner," Delia said, but she watched the way he kept circling that one building and it stuck in her mind. They named him Real that night. Tommy's idea, real like a reel of film, because he wouldn't stop circling the booth where the movies used to live. They had nowhere else to go, so they moved into the concession stand. A camp stove, 2 sleeping bags, and a cooler. That was the whole life she could give her son now. A dead husband, $1, and a drive-in nobody wanted. But lying there that first night, listening to the wind push through the speaker poles, she felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She just didn't know why yet. The next few days, Delia worked from sunup to dark. She tore the boards off the windows. She hauled dead weeds into a burn pile. She swept a decade of dust out the doors. Tommy helped where he could, and when he got bored, he chased Real through the rows, though the dog never ran far on that bad leg. And every single time she lost track of that dog, she found him in the same place. The projection booth. He'd stand in the corner facing the back wall and he'd scratch, slow at first, then harder, his claws dragging down the old plaster over and over in the exact same spot. "Real quit it," she'd say, and he'd stop. An hour later, he'd be right back at it. On the 4th day, she finally walked over and looked at what he was so worked up about. The back wall didn't match the others. The paint was a slightly different color, and when she knocked on it, 3 sharp knocks, it didn't sound like concrete. It sounded hollow. She stood there a long moment, her heart doing something funny. Then she went and got the crowbar. Now understand, a smarter woman might have left it alone. A wall built to hide something is a wall built by somebody who didn't want it found. But Delia had spent 6 months feeling like the whole world was locked and she'd lost the key. And here was one wall she could open. She fit the crowbar into the seam and pulled. The wall groaned. Real started barking, sharp and fast, spinning behind her. She pulled again, harder, throwing her whole weight into it, and a panel of plaster and lath cracked loose and crashed to the floor. Behind it was a shallow space, maybe a foot deep, dark. She reached in with her bare hand, half expecting rats. Her fingers touched cold metal. She dragged it out into the light. A film canister, the big flat round kind, way too heavy to hold film. Someone had wrapped the seam in silver tape, round and round, sealing it tight. "Mom," Tommy breathed from the door. "What is it?" "I don't know, baby." Her hands were shaking, and this time it wasn't from the cold. She peeled the tape away in long strips. Then she pried the lid, and she sat down hard on the floor of that booth because she couldn't believe what she was looking at. Cash. Rows of it banded in tidy bundles, 10s and 20s gone soft with age. Not a fortune, but more money than Delia had seen in one place in her life. Thousands. Under the cash, a stack of yellowed papers tied with string. And on top, a bundle of sealed envelopes, everyone written in the same careful hand. The name on the top envelope stopped her cold. It said, "For the family of Sam Marsh." Her dead husband's name, written on an envelope hidden inside a wall in a theater she'd bought for $90, sealed away years before she ever set foot on that lot. She didn't touch the money. She reached past all of it and took the envelopes. Her hands trembled so hard she nearly tore the first one. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, written by a man named Walt Kessler. And the moment she read the first line, the whole floor seemed to drop out from under her. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the dog led you here like I hoped he would." The dog, Real. She looked up at the shepherd, who had finally stopped barking and lay now with his chin on his paws, watching her, calm like his work was done. She kept reading. Walt Kessler had owned the drive-in for 40 years. He'd built it with his own hands back when the highway was young and busy. He wrote about full lots on summer nights, kids asleep in the back seats, a whole crowd laughing at once under the stars. And then he wrote about a man named Harlan Voss. Delia's breath caught. She knew that name. Sam had said it in the hospital too, said it like a curse, and she'd thought that was the fever talking as well. Voss, the letter said, was the richest man in the county. He owned the bank, half the storefronts, and most of the men who ran the town. Years back, Voss had wanted the drive-in land, not the theater, the land, because word had come down that the state was going to build a new road right through it, and whoever owned that dirt when the road came would be rich. But Walt wouldn't sell. So Voss went after the young man who worked the projection booth on weekends and dreamed of running the place someday. A man Walt loved like a son, Sam Marsh. Delia's vision blurred. She wiped her eyes and made herself keep reading. Voss had offered Sam a loan to buy into the drive-in, a partnership, good terms on paper. Sam signed. And then Voss called the loan early on a technicality buried in the fine print, and when Sam couldn't pay in 30 days, Voss took everything the young couple had. The savings, the little house. All of it gone over a piece of paper Sam never understood. And that, Delia realized, was the ruin she'd been living inside for years. The debt that followed them from town to town. The stress that put the gray in Sam's hair before he was 40. The worry that maybe, in the end, helped stop his heart. Harlan Voss had done that, to pressure an old man into selling his land. But here's the part that made Delia set the letter down and just breathe for a minute. It didn't work. Walt still refused to sell, even after they'd bled his young friend dry. And out of spite, or maybe love, Walt did one last thing before he died. He wrote it right there in that careful hand. I deeded this land to Sam and Delia Marsh. Quiet through a lawyer 3 counties over, so Voss would never see it coming. The real deed is in this can. The drive-in was always meant to be yours. It was yours the whole time. Voss just never knew it. Delia read that line 3 times. The drive-in was hers, not because she'd won it at auction for $90. It had been hers legally for years. Left to her and Sam by a dying man who wanted to right a wrong before he ran out of time. She untied the string on the papers, and there it was. A deed, notarized, stamped, legal. Sam and Delia Marsh, owners of the drive-in and all 12 acres, dated years back. She held it against her chest and rocked. And for the first time since the funeral, she let herself cry, the kind of crying that shakes your whole body. Tommy crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her, and Real pushed his head under her arm, and the 3 of them sat there on the floor of that dusty booth, holding on. For a little while, everything was quiet. The wind had died down. The last of the daylight came gold through the slot window. Delia wiped her face and laughed a little, surprised at herself. She stacked the money neat. She folded the deed and slid it back in the can. She made Tommy a sandwich and sat on the concession steps to watch the sun go down behind her own screen, her screen. She said the words out loud just to hear them. Her land, her son asleep against her shoulder. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Delia Marsh felt safe. She should have known better. Because a car was already coming up the highway, slow, headlights cutting through the dusk. A long black car, the kind nobody in that part of the county drove. It turned in at the broken marquee, rolled across the gravel, and stopped a few feet from where she sat. The engine cut off. The door opened, and a man in a gray suit stepped out. Delia stood up slow, her heart hammering. She'd never seen him before, but she knew exactly who he was before he said a word. It was in the way he looked at the land, not at her. Like the land was already his, and she was just something standing on it. "You Delia Marsh," he said. It wasn't a question. "Who's asking?" "Harlan Voss." He smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. "I own the bank that holds the back taxes on this dirt. I hear you paid $90 for it. That's a fine joke. but your little auction ticket doesn't mean what you think it means. Now here's where the whole thing turned, because up to that second, Delia had been fighting a memory, a dead husband, an old grief, a wrong done years ago. That was one kind of story, sad but finished. The moment Harlan Voss stepped out of that car, it stopped being about the past. "I've got surveyors coming in 10 days, Voss said. "State's finally building that road, right through here, and I've spent 20 years making sure this land ends up mine when they do." He looked her up and down, taking in the too big coat and the sleeping child. "I've bought and buried tougher people than you, sweetheart. So sign this land back to the bank, take $500 and drive away. Or fight me, and I'll take it for nothing, and I'll make sure everyone in this county watches me do it." He held out a folded paper, a quick claim ready to sign. Delia didn't take it. "It's my land," she said. Her voice shook, but she said it. "I've got the deed." Something flickered across Voss's face, just for a second, because Voss had spent 20 years certain that no such deed existed, and now this widow, this nobody, was telling him it did. "There is no deed," he said, slower now. "Kessler died with nothing. I made sure of it." "You made sure of a lot of things," Delia said. "You made sure my husband died broke and ashamed over a loan you tricked him into. Didn't you?" The smile was gone now. "You have no idea what you're standing on," Voss said quietly. "That deed, if it exists, is the only thing between me and 20 years of work. Do you understand what men like me do to protect 20 years of work?" He stepped closer. "Burn it, bury it. Whatever you found in that booth, you forget you ever saw it. This is the only time I'm going to ask nice." And that was the new stakes right there. This was no longer a woman grieving a dead man. This was a woman alone on a dark lot with her sleeping son, holding the one piece of paper that could destroy the most powerful man in the county. And he was not going to let her keep it. If you're still with me here, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because what Delia did next is the whole reason I wanted to tell you this story. She looked at Harlan Voss and she smiled. A small, tired, iron sort of smile. "You drove all the way out here at night," she said, "to a $90 drive-in, to scare a widow off a piece of dirt you say is worthless." She shook her head slowly. "You wouldn't have come at all if you weren't afraid of what's in that can. So no, I'm not signing anything. Now get off my land." Reel came off the steps stiff-legged, hackles up, a growl rolling out of him that didn't sound like the sad, starving dog from a week ago. It sounded like something that had finally found a person worth protecting. Voss looked at the dog, the woman, and the dark theater behind them. He tucked the paper back in his coat. 10 days, he said. "Then the surveyors come, and after that this all belongs to me one way or another." And just before he pulled away, he leaned out the window. "You've got no lawyer, no money, no name in this town, and a paper's just a paper till a court says otherwise. Who do you think that court's going to believe? You or me?" Then he was gone, taillights shrinking down the highway. Delia stood in the dark a long time, because he was right about all of it. She had no lawyer, no money for one. And in a county where Voss owned the bank in half the town, a deed found inside a wall was going to be hard to prove. She could see exactly how it would go. Voss would say she forged it. He'd say she made the whole thing up. And who was she? A drifter widow in a dead man's coat living in a concession stand. That night she didn't sleep. She sat up with the can in her lap and Reel's head on her knee, and she thought. By morning she'd made up her mind. She wasn't going to hide the deed. And she wasn't going to run to a court where Voss owned the judge as sure as he owned everything else. She was going to do the one thing Voss would never expect. The one thing a scared woman was never supposed to do. She was going to make the whole town watch. Delia spent the next 9 days working like a woman possessed. She wasn't fixing a theater. She was building a courtroom and the whole county was going to be the jury. She started with the marquee. 3 days on a borrowed ladder, scraping rust, screwing the fallen letters back into their slots. Half the bulbs were dead. She robbed the good ones from the sockets that didn't show and packed them where they did. Tommy handed her tools. Real lay at the base of the ladder, standing guard. Then she went into town. She walked into the diner, the barber shop, the feed store, the church. And to every person she said the same thing. The drive-in's opening again. 1 night only. Friday. Free admission, everybody's welcome. And there's something I need the whole town to see. Word travels fast in a small place. By Wednesday, people were talking, some out of kindness, some out of pity. Most out of plain curiosity, because nobody could figure out how a penniless widow was going to light up a dead drive-in in a week. And some of that talk, of course, got back to Harlan Voss. He sent a man out on Thursday, not himself this time, a lawyer thin and nervous who stood on her gravel and read her a letter full of long words that all meant the same thing: cease, desist, trespass. The bank claimed the land. Any gathering would be illegal. She'd be arrested. Delia listened to the whole thing. Then she said, "You tell Mr. Voss the show starts at sundown Friday, and you tell him I hope he comes. I've got a seat saved just for him." The lawyer left. She kept working. Here's the thing she'd figured out that first night. Voss's whole power came from doing things quiet. The loan Sam signed, quiet. The land grab, quiet. Every dirty thing that man had ever done, he'd done in an office with the door shut. His power lived in the dark. So Delia was going to drag it out into the light, in front of everyone, where no judge he owned could bury it. Friday came. By sundown, cars were rolling in off the highway. First a few, then a dozen, then more than Delia could count. Families, old couples, teenagers, the barber, the preacher. The men who'd laughed at the auction, come now to see what the joke had turned into. They parked in the crooked rows and rolled down their windows, and the whole lot filled with the murmur of a crowd that hadn't gathered in years. Delia stood in the booth, the metal can beside her, her hands slick with sweat. Tommy was down front. Real paced, and a long black car turned in at the marquee and parked right at the back, where a man could watch everything and slip away fast. Harlan Voss got out and leaned against his door with his arms crossed, certain he'd come to watch a foolish woman fail in front of her whole town. Delia flipped the marquee on first. The old sign shuddered, buzzed, and then blazed to life against the dark, brighter than anything on that highway for 50 miles. The crowd let out a real sound, a collective breath, because half of them remembered that light from when they were young. It said the drive-in was open. It said something dead had come back. Then Delia stepped out, walked down front and climbed up onto the hood of an old truck so the whole lot could see her. She had no microphone. She just had her voice, and the years and the truth. "Most of you know me now," she called out. "Widow, bought this place for $90. You probably think I'm crazy." A few soft laughs. "I don't blame you, but I didn't get you out here to watch a movie. I got you out here because I found something in that booth, and every one of you deserves to hear it." And then, in the light of that marquee in front of the whole town, she read Walt Kessler's letter out loud. She read about the full summer nights and the sleeping kids. Old folks nodded, remembering. Then she read about Harlan Voss, about the road coming and the land he wanted, and the loan he used to bleed a young man dry. She read her own husband's name, Sam Marsh, and how Voss took the house and the savings and left them with nothing but a debt Sam never understood. She read it slow, in the dark, and the whole lot went dead quiet. Then she held up the deed. "Walt Kessler deeded this land to me and my husband years ago. Quiet, so Voss would never see it coming. This drive-in was mine before I ever paid a dime for it. And Harlan Voss," she pointed straight to the back where the black car sat, "Harlan Voss knew there might be a deed. That's why he drove out here in the dark to scare me. That's why he sent a lawyer to threaten me. He wanted this buried. He wanted me to burn it. Well, here it is, in front of all of you. Now let him try." Every head in that lot turned toward the back. Harlan Voss stood pinned in the light of his own headlights and 100 pairs of eyes, and that's when the man's control finally cracked. He shoved off the car and stormed forward through the rows, shouting that it was a forgery, that she was a liar, a con artist, a nobody. He reached the truck, and this is the part I told you about at the very start. He grabbed a paper off the tailgate, the cease and desist his own lawyer had left, thinking it was her deed, and he tore it clean in half and threw the pieces at her feet, screaming for her to get out, screaming that Sam died with nothing and she'd die with nothing too. Reel came off the truck bed snarling. Voss stumbled back. And Delia knelt down, calm, and gathered the torn pieces, and held them up so the crowd could see. "You just tore up your own lawyer's letter," she said quietly. "The deed's already been copied. It's with a lawyer 3 counties over, same as Walt did it the first time. You can't burn what's already in 100 hands." Then an old man near the front stepped forward, gray, stooped, leaning on a cane. He'd worked at Voss's bank 30 years, everyone knew him, and he said loud enough for all to hear, "She's telling the truth. I processed the Marsh loan myself. Voss called it early on purpose. I've kept the papers all these years because I was ashamed. I'll bring them to any court she wants." And that was it. That was the moment the ground shifted under Harlan Voss for good. Because once one person tells the truth out loud, the next one finds the nerve. Another man spoke up about a loan of his own. Then a woman. The dark that Voss had lived in his whole life came apart right there under that marquee, and there was nothing he could do but stand in it. He looked around at the faces of the people he'd ruled for 20 years, and he saw that not one of them was afraid of him anymore. He got in his black car and drove away, and this time nobody watched him go. They were all looking at Delia. She climbed down off that truck with her knees shaking, and Tommy ran into her arms, and the whole lot broke into a sound she'd never forget. Not laughter, not pity, applause. 100 people clapping in the dark for a widow who'd walked into the light and won. That summer, the drive-in opened for real. The road never came, as it turned out. The state moved it 40 miles north, and just like that, the land Voss had schemed 20 years to steal went back to being what it always was, a worthless-looking lot with a big white screen, which was exactly what made it priceless. Voss lost more than the land. Once people started talking, they didn't stop. The bank examiners came. The old teller brought his papers, and so did others, and the quiet things Harlan Voss had done in closed rooms all his life got read out loud in a courtroom he did not own. He didn't go to prison, men like him rarely do, but he lost the bank. He lost the town. He lost the thing he'd spent his whole life buying, which was the fear in other people's eyes. Last anyone heard, he sold his big house and left the county, and nobody was sorry. Delia used Walt's hidden cash the way she believed he'd have wanted, not on herself, on the drive-in. New bulbs across the whole marquee, a working projector, fresh gravel, painted speaker poles, a coat of white on that tall screen. She fixed the concession stand and moved her and Tommy into the little house out back that Walt had lived in, which had been theirs on paper the whole time too. And on Friday nights, the whole town came. They came the way they had when Walt was young. Kids in pajamas asleep in the back seats. Old couples in lawn chairs holding hands. Teenagers sharing popcorn. The barber, the preacher, the man who'd sworn the truth in the light that first night. They filled that lot, and Delia stood in the booth her husband once dreamed of running and watched the movie flicker out across 100 upturned faces, and she understood, finally, what Sam had been trying to tell her from that hospital bed. The drive-in. It was always supposed to be ours. He hadn't been out of his mind at all. He'd been telling her where to go. He'd been handing her a life, If only she was brave enough to reach in and take it. Real lived 4 more good years. His leg never fully healed, but he never needed it to. Every Friday he'd make his slow circle around the projection booth, the same booth he'd scratched at until a widow tore down a wall, and then he'd lie at the base of the screen and watch the lot fill up, like he was counting the people, making sure everybody made it home. When he finally passed, Delia buried him right there under the screen and set a small stone with one word on it: real. The dog who came with the place. The dog who led her to the truth. Tommy grew up running that drive-in. He runs it still. And sometimes, on a slow night after the last car has pulled out and the highway's gone quiet, Delia climbs up into the booth alone and reads Walt Kessler's letter one more time, the paper soft as cloth now from all the years of handling. She thinks about that auction. $90, everything she had left in the world, laid down on a place everybody else laughed at. Then she flips the marquee on, just for herself, and stands in the doorway while it blazes against the dark, the brightest thing on that whole empty highway. Because a man in a gray suit once told her she had nothing and would die with nothing. And she stood in the light and proved him wrong and gave a whole town its Friday nights back. That's the story. And the next time somebody tells you that you've got nothing left, that you're broke and beaten and there's no way up, I want you to remember a widow, a limping dog, and a wall that was hiding the truth the whole time. Sometimes the thing everybody laughed at is the only thing worth having. You just have to be brave enough to buy it.